The Premier League has started, and today we're analyzing the match between Manchester City and Wolverhampton. Let's go! If we talk about Manchester City's setup, during the build-up, the right-back Rico Lewis was moving into the holding midfield zone. And when City played out from the goalkeeper, they shaped into a 3-2-5. However, Rico Lewis didn't look too comfortable in the holding zone today and made some tactical mistakes. For example, in this episode, we see how deep he drops into own penalty box, blocking the passing lane to Stones, who was holding width. That could have been a very useful option to break Wolves' pressing block. In this situation, Lewis simply had to stay higher. Instead, he receives the ball in an awkward position for himself, then just plays it to Ruben Dias, but again, not in rhythm, and the ball goes out of play. So there were some positioning issues in this match, and there's still work to be done in the build-up. If we look at the team's structure and possession, it was a back three of Aït-Nouri, Ruben Dias, and Stones. What was a bit strange for me is that Aït-Nouri stayed so deep, considering he's usually such an attacking player. I expected it to look a little different. One interesting element was the diamond in midfield, which helped City progress quickly through the center thanks to the density of players. In this diamond, most of the time Rico Lewis and Nico Gonzalez were at the base, while Tijjani Reijnders and Bernardo Silva occupied the upper part. If Wolves didn't provide enough resistance in midfield, sometimes only one player stayed in the holding role, usually Nico Gonzalez. Rico Lewis took the right half space, Bernardo Silva the left half space, and Reijnders played as the attacking midfielder at the tip of the diamond. A key point was how many players were concentrated in the center of the pitch. Wolves defended in a compact mid-block, and City overloaded the middle to create quick combinations. But the wings were left relatively open, and City didn't shift too many players there. Instead, they kept isolations for Jeremy Doku and Oscar Bob, which was absolutely the right choice, since both are high-quality players who can create individually and deliver dangerous crosses. That's exactly what happened in this game. When Oscar Bob drifted inside without the ball, Rico Lewis stayed wide. One player was always maintaining width. In such moments, City's shape resembled a 4-3-3. But Lewis's more natural role in the final third was in the right half space, where he combined with teammates and then attacked depth in that channel. It's also important to note that the two wingers were positioned very wide to maximize isolations. These isolations for Doku and Bob were very effective, often ending with dangerous crosses, and City consistently filled the box. You can see they always had at least 4 players attacking the final zones. One at the near post, one in the center, one at the far post, plus another player ready for the second ball inside the box. City attacked these areas with great intensity, and there were no questions about their commitment. This was a repeating pattern throughout the match. Speaking of Tijjani Reijnders, he was the player who impressed me the most today. A perfectly balanced midfielder, capable of making vertical runs, receiving between the lines, dropping deeper, and delivering phenomenal passes. Overall, both City's inside players, Bernardo Silva and Reijnders, and at times Rico Lewis, when he pushed higher in the absence of strong pressing, attacked the half spaces really well. That's a strong pattern from this team. Even tight corridors, like in this episode with Jeremy Doku, were successfully exploited with passes breaking through. As for Manchester City's pressing, they pressed in a 4-1-4-1 structure, with Erling Haaland leading the press and being its main trigger. He chased the ball carrier, forcing play wide, pressing at maximum speed and intensity. Behind him, the 4 midfielders, plus the holding midfielder, blocked all passing options, forcing Wolves to go long. City's players consistently won these long ball duels. And it wasn't only Haaland pressing aggressively. The entire structure worked collectively. There were clear pressing triggers and patterns in City's system. The midfield line of 4 didn't always press aggressively, but under certain conditions they stepped out. And often it was Bernardo Silva initiating it. One of the key triggers was when a Wolves player received the ball with his back to goal. Even from a fairly long distance, you could see Bernardo immediately sprinting to apply pressure. But in these cases, City's midfield wasn't always compact enough. For example, Doku was positioned very wide, Nico Gonzalez shifted into the right half space, and City's center back, seeing the ball was open, dropped a few steps deeper to cover the most dangerous threat, the space in behind. Logically, that's the priority, but because of this, he couldn't step out to close down the free Wolves midfielder, who played a one-touch pass into open space for the striker. Since City's center back had already committed to the Wolves player receiving the ball, he was late to cover, leaving a gap that Strand Larsen exploited to launch a dangerous attack. This is an area where City really need to sit down and adjust their defensive structure in midfield. Either Doku has to tuck in much narrower to block that quarter, or Nico Gonzalez shouldn't drift so far wide into the half space. Instead, he should position himself more evenly between two opponents to maintain balance. Alternatively, the center back must engage more tightly, not allowing the Wolves player to even receive the ball cleanly. Another detail, although Haaland directed the pressing, Bernardo Silva often stepped up high to mark Wolves' holding midfielder. He was always responsible for shutting that option down. But on the wing, there was often a 2 versus 1 in Wolves' favor. Doku had to deal with both the center back and the fullback, while Ait Nouri stayed deeper, not proactive enough in pushing up. Because of this, Wolves' fullback frequently received the ball with ease, just by playing over Doku, and could then continue the attack. And this wasn't a one-off, it repeated several times. When defending in a mid-block, City again used the 4-1-4-1 shape. But there were miscommunications here too. In the second half, for instance, Marmoush was on the left wing. City's idea was to close the central corridor to prevent the inside pass, which makes sense, but the players positioned themselves too close together, leaving the wide channel open. Wolves easily exploited it, playing out to the full back. On one occasion, Ait Nouri stepped out to close down the ball carrier, but that opened the space behind him, and Wolves immediately exploited it with a pass in behind. I also want to highlight City's high defensive line, which worked impressively well overall. The backline moved in sync, stepping up decisively to hold the offside trap, even in risky situations when the ball was open. Credit especially goes to Ruben Dias. In one scene, he was sitting deeper initially, but just before the Wolves player made the pass, Dias stepped forward, leaving the striker offside. It looked risky, but in reality, Dias had it under control. As for Tijjani Reijnders, once again he showed pure top-class quality. Even in a simple situation, where an average midfielder would need 2 passes to switch play through John Stones, Reijnders did it in one. He doesn't need helpers. He just whips a single pass and flips the attack. That saves time, prevents Wolves from reorganizing, and instantly creates a 1 versus 1 for Oscar Bob. Look also at this episode. Reijnders shapes as if he's going left, then cuts inside sharply, leaving the defender wrong-footed. Near the box, with no pressure on him, he delivers a cross to the far post. The way he manipulates defenders is pure class. He feints, glides past, and creates a chance out of nothing. Now let's move to the goal by Erling Haaland. Watch how it starts with Reijnders, picking up the ball deep in City's half. He drives into open space, shapes his body as if to go right, forcing the Wolves midfielder to block that lane. Then he slips the ball between 2 defenders, breaks pressure, and threads a perfect through pass into the stride of Rico Lewis, who had made a forward run. Absolute perfection in timing and execution. In the final phase, Haaland initially stood offside and didn't participate. Wolves' defenders didn't really account for him because of that. When Lewis received the ball, he already knew what to do before his first touch. Haaland would be arriving at the far post, so Lewis plays a first-time ball across the box. The Wolves defender hesitated. He wasn't sure if Haaland would dart across his front or peel to the far post. But again, the move was born entirely from Tijjani Reijnders. Speaking about Tijjani Reijnders' goal, first of all, it came from a huge mistake by the Wolves player, who misplaced a very poor pass. But look at Reijnders. He explodes to around 35 kilometers per hour, keeps running in rhythm with the attack, and at that insane speed strikes left-footed perfectly into the bottom corner. Wow, and look at the next goal. Again, Reijnders played a massive role. His first touch is simply world-class. So soft, so precise, directly into space. That's just unbelievable. He drives the ball forward, plays into Oscar Bob, then instantly positions himself to create another passing lane in the half space, unmarked, because Wolves' defenders are fully focused on the ball carrier. He receives inside the box, and with great awareness, he realizes that if Haaland isn't in position, the second wave will arrive. That's exactly what happened. Haaland delayed his run, stayed on the edge of the box, and Reijnders calmly laid the ball off for him. Haaland struck it first time from the edge of the area and scored. Why fight for position inside the box when in transition, with Wolves stretched and massive gaps between their lines? You can receive the ball completely free in the second wave. Reijnders read the game perfectly and made the right choice. To summarize this match, I really liked Manchester City's intensity. They dominated the entire game. Reijnders is simply a top-class signing with the potential to become the best midfielder in the Premier League and with room to spare. Haaland was sensational as always, with his movement inside the box. The only concern is still the defense. They need to fine-tune their mechanisms, especially in closing central areas. In the 4-1-4-1 defensive shape, sometimes the single holding midfielder couldn't cover all the space or take the right positions quickly enough. But in terms of title favorites, for me it's Manchester City without any doubt. They have the deepest squad in the league. The rotation options are insane. Sometimes you don't even know who will start, because on each position they have 4 or 5 players of almost equal quality. It's a phenomenal pool of talent City have managed to assemble. And this will be a huge advantage not only in the Premier League, but also in the Champions League, where rotation is key. We saw with Chelsea last year how depth and rotation helped them manage the long season across the Conference League and Premier League. So, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments who you think will win the Premier League this season.